Yeah, but it is interesting because back to, these things that we try to teach, and again, it's whether it's our children or whether it's, as we think about how we approach it ourselves, because as you said, it starts to get to that point where there are some pretty advanced scammers out there too that again only make people put their guard up a lot more. So I think that ability to build that trust and make it feel real, but then what you were describing before about that connection, that can really
Yeah,
help again too, because now you know that, okay, I'm less likely to get burned in this deal, because that's what
yeah.
the other side worries about.
But
They're going to sell me something right away.
that's where we are now. And if you look at, like, moving into 2025, where we are is that it's not that cold doesn't work. It can work because you might
Yeah.
get someone on the right day. If you buy enough lottery tickets, you will win eventually, or you're meant to. So it's just that it's different now. And so the approach has to be much more based on the truth that trust comes from familiarity. There are some, for instance, A-list celebrities that you've never met, that you've seen in films, but you've seen so many times, you probably, because of a perceived sense of the persona, you probably trust that celebrity. If you met them, you'd probably trust that person because of how
Right.
you see how you've received them, because of the volume of times you've seen them, and
Yeah.
that familiarity breeds a lot. And that's the technique being used with content. It's, if you can keep seeing me, but in the right way, then
Hmm.
that does the heavy lifting. And if I keep seeing the same person over and over again, and then allows me to feel a bit more familiar with them. So maybe I'll actually let my guard down and not interact yet, because most people don't interact, but I'll allow myself to want to read their stuff and to, I'll be like, okay,
Hmm.
I keep seeing, okay, what have they actually got to say? And you've got to remember that not all things are equal, because when we first consume someone's content, we view the same bit of content as when we've seen them for the 10th time in a very different way. Because what happens is we start coming a little bit more fond of that person because we like the way they said a thing. And by the 10th time we're seeing their content, we're like, I kind of like them. They're kind of my kind of person, or not, in
Yeah.
which case I've gone. But, and then it's like, who is this person? You click on their profile. Now we're there. And with that, over
Mm.
time, with enough frequency, it does this low key nurturing that results in them kind of falling in love with you a bit. And then you position, the way I describe it is, you are no longer going from obscurity to an expert. You're moving from an expert to their expert. Now they're
Interesting.
choosing you as the font of knowledge over anyone else who may be better or has more followers or whatever, but they're choosing you because you just have the right vibe for them. And that now is really where we want to meet them. And because we can do that, it's starting to borderline being absurd to approach someone completely cold, and especially with the tools we've got nowadays, we should at least be if we're going to approach someone cold, it should be, as I mentioned earlier, at least because we've got something in common or something that they did, even if it was low level. If someone looked at my profile,
Yeah.
we've not interacted, but I would certainly prefer to reach out and speak to that person over someone identical in many ways demographically, but who'd never seen me or heard of me before. So I
Sure.
prefer that kind of quasi cold as opposed to truly cold
Yeah.
lead.
Richard, I mean, it's so fascinating. You talk about, the number of interactions through the content.
Yeah.
And, you know, we got introduced to you through Laura Acosta, who's kind of, obviously doing, is a friend of the podcast and doing really great on LinkedIn. But on the podcast, when we talked to her, she credited you as kind of in the beginning, guiding her and showing her the right way. So
Okay.
if Laura came to you today and said, how do I become successful in selling online on LinkedIn? What would you tell her today versus what you told her 3 years ago?
Yeah, it's an interesting one because for those who don't know Lara, where she is now is that she is incredible popularity and a lot of people are very fond of her. And that starts with a persona that she's broadcasted, which is incredibly authentic in the sense that the person you see online is the person she is. But also, what I love is that there's depth there too. She's not just pretending or mimicking or regurgitating. She's actually got a lot of depth and thought, and she is a real student of the art of content marketing. And what's interesting is that she's gained that popularity through 2.5 years on LinkedIn of solidly grinding all hours, to the point where I'm like, you really should get some sleep, but so what I'd be telling her now is, you need to consider, I mean, if she wasn't converting, I'd be saying to her, you need to consider what comes next. And herein is the most important part of content marketing, is that content is not king. Content is not everything, nor even is your community or your audience. It's the start point. And a lot of people feel it's the whole game. And now the people who wake up and think, oh, I wonder how well on my mobile, I wonder how well my content did last night. Instead, it should be like, well, that's the start. So what's next? And so the advice I'd be giving her, if all things were as they are now, but she had no money, is, well, where are you sending the people? And on the basis that the content, this is crucial for all content, on the basis that the content is saying the right things to the right people, as in those you're trying to ultimately acquire as a customer, then where are you leading them next? So the human animal, purely through the way it's built, is naturally curious. So if we say or do something stimulating, we're naturally going to click on that profile link and say, well, who is this Lara Acosta person? We're just hardwired to be that kind of voyeur. It might be that we really don't like them. We might be very toxic and need serious therapy, in which case we'll click on them because we'll be like, well, let me find something wrong with this person so I can make myself feel better about my world.
Yeah.
Or indeed, ideally, it's more like, wow, that's really good. Who is this person? And now I can go learn some more. So, it follows that if the process is content, profile, well, where's next? Like, what is the next link, and what's that user experience look like? If you're looking at high ticket, low volume sales, then you need to be meeting them in the DMs. So the magic happens in the one-on-one interactions in the DMs. Sure, reply to comments, but if someone looks at your profile, that's a massive tell that you stimulated that response. If they do comment, or if they, if they're interacting in some way, well, then so connect with them and get talking. The vast majority of my larger deals, rather than little, the little kind of joke three-figure ones, they come from lurkers who aren't, mucking around writing comments on posts. They are a senior decision maker at a business, and they are looking, then they click, and then they're gone. So you need to meet them there, and it's the next thing. So that advice is really important. She doesn't need help with her content. The question is, what comes next, and what are you going to do with that traffic, knowing as you do the state that they are in when they arrive at your profile.